When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite. Looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Within the gaming world, there are your general gamers, but then there are those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming. If you're one of those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming, we certainly got the place to send you. Scorpion Lair Games. That's right, Scorpion Lair Games is the creators of the true crime hit Killers, the card game. Let's not forget they also have Killers Clothing Company, their profiler game, and things like the 5-Minute Murder channel on YouTube. And we certainly can't forget the new book that is certainly a hit, Beyond the Headliners, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Make sure you visit Jeff and the Scorpion Lair Games on Facebook and everywhere today.
Hello, my name is Gille Klabin, co-writer, director, and VFX artist on Weekend at the End of the World, and you are listening to Crazy Train Radio.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, looking forward to this one because our next guest has a new horror comedy film that is everything entertaining. That is for sure. And the project is called Weekend at the End of the World. And I do want to say thank you during the intro to our friend Aaron from A&B Horror Movies connecting us with this guest and the movie. However, our next guest is a writer, director, and editor. So let's welcome Gille Klabin.
Hello. Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
I'm sorry, sir. I just said it right. It's one of those days.
Hey, listen, there's not a single conversation that doesn't start with me explaining how my name is pronounced. It's Gille Klabin.
Yeah. Mr. Klabin, how are you, sir? And welcome. I'm glad we're finally able to do this.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So I've noticed this a lot lately when doing a little homework and background on projects and such, is on one outlet, I noticed the movie is coming out in April. Then where I was looking elsewhere, it had said it was from 2025. So, what is the exact release for this, and how is it getting released?
So it's actually coming out on April 20th this year. And what tends to happen, this has happened to myself and many of the filmmakers I know, is the first time it premieres at a film festival, places like IMDb register that as the release date.
Okay.
So it premiered in September of 2025 at Grimfest in the UK. And we have been desperately asking IMDb to stop listing the movie as released because it's not available. But it will be available on all the major streaming platforms. We're doing a TVOD, or a VOD release. Apple, Amazon, Vudu, YouTube Movies, Google Play, all that stuff. April 20th, basically wide release, and after that, that window can be anything from sort of 3 to 6 months. And there might be a streaming deal depending how we do in that initial release. And then it'll be available on AVOD platforms like Tubi, Zumo, and Vudu when they do supported by advertised viewing as well.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention IMDb and throw them under the bus. But yeah, that totally makes sense with it when it's released in a festival and all that fun
Yeah.
stuff.
It's automated, it's not like some nefarious operator at IMDb is looking to mess up our release schedule, but it just happens and it's annoying.
Yeah, it's the nature of the beast, let's say, because
Mhm.
I know part of that's probably AI and all that, fun stuff, and it's been
Yeah.
a lot of hot topics lately.
Yeah.
So anyway, weekend at the end of the world. And I was actually listening to a different conversation you had done. I guess it was around the first festival or so last
Mhm.
year. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but apparently, when deciding to do this project, it was intended to be a very short movie that was shot over a weekend, but ended up evolving from there. And almost like a love letter to making a movie with friends and all. How would you?
So it was we didn't intend on making a short, but it was intended to be a very small movie. So we were going to shoot over a series of weekends. We were going to use Clay, my co-writer who plays Carl. His parents have a cabin 6 hours north of where we live, and it's like built by his grandpa, super tiny little thing. So I have camera gear and I'm a huge nerd. Like I can do all the stuff myself. So we were really just going to write something that we could do ourselves and not have to sort of, wait for permission, as it were, from any sort of financing body or studio. Um, and we wrote it with that in mind, four characters, pretty much one location, and then also leaning into the fact that I'm a very enthusiastic VFX artist. So I was like, okay, we could shoot in the woods and I'll try to make it look like another dimension. And so the whole thing was written with the aim of doing it ourselves. And I reached out to we had like a 2 year process of we sent it out to some people just for feedback. Some people were like, "Hey, I don't think you should rush to do this. This movie's actually pretty funny and interesting." And they put us in touch with different production companies who, at one point somebody was floating, giving us $500,000 and offering to spend millions on advertising the movie. And they kept like dangling the carrot in front of us. And then eventually in June 2024, um, my wife was pregnant. Clay was about to get married. And we just had a talk. And I was like, look, man, if we don't do this now ourselves, we're going to just be waiting forever. So we just decided to, put the foot on the gas and get going. And I reached out to an old actor friend of mine, Cameron Fife, who played Miles. And he had become a producer over the years. And we'd kind of drifted off into our own worlds. And I sent him the script being like, hey, I would love some advice and maybe talk to him about potentially trying to approach people for some money because the original plan was like squirrel away money and do this ourselves. And when he got involved, he kind of like leveled up the project. He was like, look, I think I can actually get probably a bigger actor to play Hank. And he pitched Thomas Lennon to us, and we were just like, man, there's just no way Thomas Lennon's going to do this movie. And Tom Lennon signed on he basically said, I'm in 2 minutes after Cameron sent him the email. I was like, oh, this dude's just going to come on board. He hasn't even read the script, but he trusted Cameron. He liked Cameron. And then suddenly, it's a slightly bigger movie. So then we were like, okay, this has more commercial appeal. It might be worth trying to get money from places. So we hit up between us, literally every single person who had ever talked about financing anything, and then all our friends, all our family. And it was roughly like 17 different people ended up putting in money, and it went from something I was going to empty my savings to do to something that we ended up, by the time we were shooting, we had like, I believe it was $235,000. And all said and done with post-production and everything, we ended up going up to $296,000.
And it was like a 12-day shoot all in told,
Oh yeah. Yeah. So like a big thing for us is, the whole team, we all crawled our way up the ladder, and that's even to pretend we got that far up the ladder, but we've all worked on a lot of projects, and there was just a real understanding of the only way we're going to pull off this very ambitious movie is if we really respect our team and we really do best practices. So with that in mind, we did 5-day weeks, 12-hour days, and we shot the whole movie in 12 days. And we actually wrapped early 5 of those days just because, I mean, we were just ready. It was just a very, very planned, very well-oiled machine. We didn't mess around.
Now, with this project, there's how do I describe this? A little bit of an Evil Dead, Shaun of the Dead vibes. There's also the aspect of having a psychedelic yet heartfelt trip. It almost makes you go, what in the fuck is going on here? So there's that aspect.
I love that.
So, you had then this short timeline and all that stuff, and you were doing a lot of this stuff yourself behind the scenes, the editing and stuff, because I mentioned in the intro you're a man of many facets. So what was all this coming together once like for you, but also as someone who's a writer, director, editor, having your hands in different cookie jars? How do you know when to say when as an artist, if that makes sense? Because a lot of friends of mine are not only actors or in the entertainment field from that perspective, the writing, directing, acting, but there's also the musicians that who are singer-songwriters. It's like, when do you know to let the bird out of the cage, per se?
Well, there's a famous adage I'm going to butcher, but it's like you never finish. You just decide when to walk away, as it were, because you can fidget with something forever. The good thing about filmmaking is there is an inevitable bottleneck, right? There's a point where the time you spend on a project, there's like a dollar symbol attached to each one of those different arenas, as it were. Production, when you're on set and the people are there and you're feeding them and you're paying for travel and all the costs are there, those minutes are strict. They're limited. So for me, I'm an editor, but I cut my movie with Lana Wolverton. I've made 2 movies. I cut both movies with her. She is my editing partner. But I know when I'm shooting, I know when I've got something because I've cut so much of my own work. So
are you
that
editing
really,
in your head as you're
watching
things?
And
okay,
and
this fits.
Yeah, and it's a passive thing at that. It's almost kind of to calm my nerves when I'm shooting something, like, because I've edited so much, because I've watched hours and hours and hours of footage. I know when I've hit the exact frame I need to make the cut. I know when I'm doing a pickup that it will cut with the other angle I've got. because the movie's being edited in my head passively the whole time. It's like it's very lucky because that's just how my weird brain works. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like we're all just like weird, different nerd X-Men, right? Like we have our own little weird powers that work. The thing that I did solo on this was the visual effects. So for me, it was very, very fortuitous. So if I'm in a situation, in a 12-day shoot and on a low budget shoot, there's always compromise, but it's very lucky to be the guy who's in charge of the visual effects so that when you do compromise on set, I can step in with knowledge and say, oh, I can save my own ass here. Like I know that even though, that thing was left in shot or this shot crossed over with something else, like I know I can fix it because I'm going to be the guy clicking the mouse and moving those pixels around. And even on the front end, I planned the film to such a specific degree that we were just very, very ready when it came time to be on set. So basically, the machine was so so well oiled. It was so planned out that the shoot itself became basically just like a prepared environment for the actors to do their best work. You know what I mean? Like from a technical perspective, we were all on the same page. We were all operating as best as we could be. I mean, to that example, like I did 6 drafts of the storyboards, and then I made very rough animatics in Blender, 3D animation software. So there's basically like a really ugly version of the movie, but I could take that to my team, to like my cinematographer, Aaron Grasso, who I've been working with for 15 years. I could show him on an iPad and be like, here are the shots of the scene, and here they are being played together. So when we had to adapt, the rest of the movie is there. Granted, it is hard on the eyes, but it's there. There's a plan. There's no guesswork done on the day. And with that much planning and with knowledge of how to pull off post, it facilitates a very efficient shoot, which is why we could pull this off in 12 days and why we wrapped early several of those days, is because we got what we needed. And I could say that, and it wasn't like some superpower, it was just preparation.
And I treat the pod in the show almost like, and you said it here without saying it, but you'll understand what I mean in terms of I treat this like you would a respectable movie, whether it's an independent, big budget, doesn't matter, whatever we're dealing with. And that being, you make the product 3 times. And so there's the pre-planning stage, the writing, the research, whatever the case is. There's the production shoot, or in my case, the conversation with you. And then there's the post-production, put everything together to release the episode, the movie, etc. So, I mean, that's how my head works.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've heard that expression before about things being, you were able to make adjustments if you need it because of the pre-planning, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, they say, I think the expression is, I think it applies to film as well. You write a movie 3 times, you write it, you shoot it,
exactly where I'm going with it.
Yeah. And I think, I think that's the beauty of it. And I guess I tried to, my personal ethos is watch your movie as many times as you can before you've made it, because the shooting of your movie is terrifyingly expensive, and it's a real like pressure cooker, time equals money situation. But me staying up late at night and using 3D models and a camera to map out all my shots, that only costs my life, which is time I'm committing to this thing I love doing anyway. But like to the degree that I did 3D scans of our locations once we locked in our locations, and I took those 3D scans into Blender and I animated in the actual location where we were filming. So I was watching my movie as much as I could.
And like you said, then you could take that stuff with the iPad and all, that pre-planning to the cinematographer and everybody to the next day. Okay, this is what we're looking to do. This is what I'm thinking. You could show them on your iPad with the 3D models and everything.
Yeah,
So
you're
they
bridging
can,
the gap between your words and their imagination.
yeah, where you can go. Because sometimes you could tell me all day long about something, and it's like, okay. But if you show me it, that's like,
Hmm.
okay, now I see where you're going. And like you said, with the imagination, that things run wild. You mentioned Thomas Lennon, though, the
Hmm.
legendary comedian. And the, the story I heard, or part of anyway, and you can fill in the blanks, is that you were, so he says, yes, I'm into it, count me on. But he comes to your house for the first table read,
Hmm.
and it was, oh, hey, how you doing? It was a quick hello, come on in, you're getting ready to start. What happened there with Thomas?
Yeah, he showed up. Is my first time meeting him. We're doing our first table read, and he comes to the gate, and I'm immediately gushing, just saying like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for coming on board. I'm so excited." And he, in his beautiful dry way, he says, "Yeah, I'm out. I'm not going to do the project, but I figured the professional thing to do would to be come in person and quit." And I was just immediately struck by. I was like, "Okay, this is going to be fun." And obviously, like he is as funny in real life and as perfect with his performance. Like the guy doesn't break. He doesn't laugh in takes. He's just so inconceivably funny that he can deliver any line and any absurdism just with a straight face. So he showed up pretending that he was there to quit, which part of me obviously was immediately terrified. I was like, well, of course, yeah, why wouldn't you quit? I mean, you're Tom Lennon, we're idiots. Why would but he was joking. And then we sat down for our first table read, and he gave us like 3 or 4 suggestions for the script, all of which immediately we added, not only because I would have done anything to keep him on the project, but they were just great ideas. They were just brilliant, brilliant ideas. Like, for example, chief amongst them, his character, Hank, who gets possessed um, originally in our script, when he gets sort of manipulated by Mima to be this kind of like half like a escort goon of our two characters. In our script, initially, he kind of went back to his normal friendly neighbor Patter, but he was still kind of this ghoul. And he suggested having a messier, broken version where he's somewhere in between, like a ghoul and his old self, which basically stripped him of 60% of his lines of dialogue and rendered him having to make like otherworldly, weird, crazy gestures and grunts and really shredding his vocal cords. That was his idea. And we were the direct beneficiaries because, the guy's he's written incredible movies. He was show running back in 1994. So he's been around, and his ideas were just always great. And even in post as well, like where he saw one of the first cuts of the movie and he gave us great guidance there. He's he's given so much of himself and he's been so supportive, and it's just a testament to a very pure love of filmmaking that he exhibited at every junction, which like he just wants to make really cool things. He does it with unending creativity and innovation and passion. And everybody on our movie got paid the same. This has never been about money. He likes to make. He's a purist.
Well, with all that said, the other thing I was curious to know, at least from the actor standpoint and all that fun stuff, can you talk about the chemistry between Cameron and Clay? Both
Yeah.
guys play Carl and Miles respectively. Respectfully, Clay was also involved with the co-writing. So, can you talk about the on-screen chemistry with those guys?
That was just a stroke of luck, of kismet. I mean, Clay is my co-writer and co-producer, and Cameron was brought on. Clay and I both did a fair amount of producing, but Cameron's really the lead producer. So when he came on and he was going to be the role of Miles, we so much of our hanging out and our attempts to rehearse inevitably led to like how basically producing conversations and script conversations because there was so much we had to do all the time. And the more time we spent together, the more we realized, well, just Clay and Cameron got along so well. But then there was just weird serendipitous things like they are from neighboring towns in Northern California. They have so many mutual friends, but somehow had never met each other. They were both big sports guys who like follow the same teams, and there was just so much overlap in the personalities that it was just became this weird thing of it was very obvious that had one thing changed and they had met previously in life, they would already be friends. But every time we sat down to rehearse, it really just became a hangout. And there was one very famous time where Clay and Cameron, I was doing another job and they went to the beach. It was like a lovely day. So they went to the beach to rehearse and they ended up not rehearsing at all and just hanging out and getting closer and being better and better friends. And thank God they did, because when it came time, one of my favorite comments we get about the movie is their chemistry. And their chemistry, like they'd only met 2 months before we started filming, but they made a real friendship that just explodes off the screen. And that's because they focused their time together to bond and to get close and are still friends now. And it feels so organic. And to me, that's like the core believability of the entire movie is you really have to believe that that they're real friends. And they became real friends very quickly, but that was because focus was on getting close rather than just running their lines.
Now, based on what I was saying earlier with all the different elements and stuff, how, at least for you and this project, how do you keep a balance of everything making sense for a story aspect to where the fans won't say fuck it in a negative light? And you know what I mean? They could, because there's a theory that I always listen to that somebody said to me, a director who's known, says there's logic that we use in real life and movie logic. But how were you able to keep everything together where you didn't lose the fans going, screw it, I'm going to change a channel, or I'm going to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of
you
course.
don't want to lose the fans.
Yeah, I mean, I made something that I would enjoy watching because I'm not a fun person to watch movies with. They say you need to suspend disbelief. I'm pretty begrudging when it comes to suspending disbelief. I feel the main thing I get pissed off with movies, like you see really cool concepts, really cool ideas, but the thing that's always neglected is heart, is an emotional anchor to make me as a human being give a shit. So, the real answer to your question is the way we did that is by writing 16 drafts of the script by the time we started shooting. And those iterations, some of those passes were to heighten the horror. Some of them were to really nail down the lore of the allness of what was happening, of what the real plan was, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of that was also to nail down the human accessibility and believability of this plot that we were tracking, because to me, all of the fanfare, all of the lunacy, and all of the horror, like the two big genres at play. There's a lot of sci-fi, but it's mainly comedy and horror. The two genres at play both need to be grounded in a human emotional story. They need heart. So that was a central focus, and it was ultimately iterative. Like, there was just iterations where we would be like, okay, now where's the emotion? Like, how do we keep this grounded in an emotional thing? Like, okay, we want Miles to do something outrageously and stupid. What's a redeeming action he does that keeps Carl and us as an audience believing that he's still a friend and not just being like this, he's being a self-serving jackass, as it were, not to give away anything in the movie, but like that was a constant, ever looming consideration. And, I guess the short answer is the way we achieve that is by doing multiple passes on the script to make sure it was always there.
Right on. So you mentioned April 20th is the official release date. So how are we putting this out there? Are you going to be doing more festival circuits? What's the game plan here?
So we decided, and a big part of this movie and a big consideration of this movie was essentially to for lack of a less dramatic term, is to essentially keep control of the movie so that we can guarantee that our investors make their money back and guarantee that everybody involved in the movie can benefit when the movie benefits. And the main way to do that was to distribute domestically ourselves. I have a background in film marketing. I cut trailers and do social media graphics and all that stuff. So we are distributing it ourselves. We've used an aggregator to get it on all the main platforms, and we are running our own marketing campaign. We're doing the media planning, the buying. We've been making assets, trailers, teasers. I'm working with this fantastic agency called Paradise Creative in Los Angeles that I've done a lot of work for. And we've got our trailer dropping very soon. The teaser is already out, and we're going to be the festival run is already done. I think there might be another festival at the end of March that might want to have us, but generally speaking, our focus is very much on release, the approaching release date. That's why I'm very grateful that you're willing to have us on, because you and your colleagues are you're shedding a light on movies in a world where there are so many movies to choose from, and we all have decision paralysis and subscription fatigue. There's just so many movies coming out all the time on all these platforms that press like this is priceless to us. So I'm going to be doing as many interviews as will have us, as many podcasts and YouTube channels, and raising awareness for it and running an effective marketing campaign. And, we're not trying to put up a billboard in the middle of Hollywood or a billboard in rural Nebraska in the hopes that our target demographic walks past. We're going to be spending very smart dollars targeting the exact people who might enjoy our movie, and running a pre-sale campaign and then a selling campaign, and then keeping awareness high, trying to engage people on Reddit. And then also I feel like we're in a world right now where independent filmmakers, if you're not taking charge and you're not thinking in novel ways, you're going to disappear in the noise, and you're going to fall victim to some predatory distribution deal. And that's not to say that the distributors are predatory. It's just that there's so many movies. It's gotten, yeah, of course, man. And it's with best intentions, but it's not sustainable anymore. So for us, this movie does not have to make a lot of money for us to make our money back. But the most important thing for us all is that it's seen by as many of the people it was intended to be seen by, and that requires a lot of work. So I'm still not off the clock. I'm very tired, but I'm doing, making all the marketing assets and creating our audiences on Meta and Google, and finding the best way to find the exact people who might enjoy this film.
Well, I can say this, and we will figure it out logistically when the time is right. But our show also does virtual watch parties where we bring projects to the audience, both known and the indie projects. So once this is released, we will work on a time period where we could bring you back on with the audience, with some of the cast and crew and whatnot, and we just have fun with it to introduce it to that particular audience as well, from both the States and Canada. So that will be fun. So
be absolutely delighted.
We will figure that out as well. So I appreciate the time. Oh, by the way, I should ask this on the personal note, if you feel like answering it.
Sure.
Has the baby been born?
My kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Yeah. My kid, it's funny. I pretty much finished. I hit export on the version of our movie that went into festivals on February 13th of 2025.
Okay.
I went downstairs and my wife's water broke, and my kid was born about 30 hours later. Yeah.
But that was going to be my question. Would you have boy, girl? What?
I have a little boy.
Nice. So it was
he's now years old.
Yeah, you mentioned that at the beginning. So it's like almost like cosmic, like you said. You hit the send button.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, now we got to focus on shift gears and focus on the
now I got to be a dad for a bit as we're entering festivals. And then we took the opportunity as we were in festivals and we were considering our distribution model. I was like, when the kid went to bed, my wife was sleeping, my dogs were fed and walked, I would come back to my computer and I would start like fiddling with some VFX shots that I thought I could elevate them just a little bit before we really had to like finalize the movie and deliver it. And we delivered to all the platforms in January. And honestly, up until January, I was still playing around with a couple of VFX shots here and there, being like, I still think I can make this better. I've had some time away from the movie. I can look at this transition and be like, that's just not good enough. I can do better. So I did.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for the time, and I look forward to everybody seeing Weekend at the End of the World.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate it, man.
Hey folks, looking for the ultimate destination for the nerd enthusiasts and collectors? Well, we